Welcome back to another episode of Becoming Relentless. I am your host, Noa McCabe, and today I am joined by someone who I am so excited to talk to. He is going to bring us all things functional health. He's been in the industry for over 13 years as a coach. He has his own company, Rise HRT, which, if you're a competitor, you may be familiar with that, as well as other ventures. But I am super excited to introduce to everybody Matt Cusano. I need a
Hey,
little
how's it going?
applause button.
Yeah,
How are you, Matt? How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you doing, Alano?
I'm good. I'm doing really well. I've been looking forward to our conversation for a long time.
Likewise.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask, first and foremost, what got you interested in starting your HRT? What were you seeing in the industry that made you want to start the clinic? Excuse me, not necessarily HRT.
No, that's okay. I knew what you meant. So it was honestly a couple of things. Number one, I think we can all agree that even now, but definitely in past years, there's been a disconnect between Western medicine and the bodybuilding fitness world. There's very limited trust in that communication, meaning most athletes and coaches aren't comfortable being 100% honest with a doctor for fear of not just judgment, but also what gets put on their medical record that could impact life insurance and health insurance in the future. A lot of people don't want to admit to certain things, but if you can't be honest with your doctor, who can you be honest with, and how can you expect the proper help? So I see it from that side, and then from the other side, obviously, majority of physicians are definitely not educated around PEDs, let alone hormones in general, and the physiology of the body and nutrition and all of those aspects. So from their side of it, we're going to get very limited help, and most likely a lot of negative bias. So it doesn't work well as a relationship for either side of it. And so what I really wanted to do was bridge that gap and provide that place that had educated and experienced health professionals that weren't going to judge. They were going to have an open mind, um, and have this passion about not just telling people, no, don't do that, it's dangerous. Have the understanding they're going to do it either way. So let's at least educate them and guide them on the healthiest way to do this intelligently and reduce risk. And then on the opposite side of the coin, teaming up with so many coaches and colleagues that I knew, letting them know, hey, I have this place that you can trust to send your clients to. They have an understanding of PEDs, they have an understanding of the demands of being a competitive bodybuilder, or even just the demands of the fitness industry in general. Um, and so it was a two-way street of trust and open-mindedness for both sides.
Right.
I think a major goal for me too was removing a lot of stigmas around the competitive bodybuilding world, especially in females. Um, Over the past 30 years, the general consensus was, just whatever it takes, team no sleep, grind it out, and the more suffering, the better. And now a lot of those people that were preaching those things, 10, 20, 30 years ago, aren't doing so hot health wise or competitively. So it turns out that wasn't great advice. And now we're having to, I like to use the word, reprogram people to a different thought process and mentality around the overall sport of bodybuilding. Are there risks? Absolutely. There's risks with skiing, with NASCAR racing, with football. There's risks in any sport, but these should be calculated risks and intelligent choices. And that's something that I feel has been lacking. So I really wanted to also just provide as much education as possible and try to shift that stigma between this connection of unhealthy and success.
Right.
There's a connection there that's wrong. Healthy and success is the connection, you know?
Yes, I could not agree more, and I love that you took it this route because you and I actually connected on Instagram, and I think one of the ways that we did that was you were commenting on a post of mine where I talked about PED usage. And I'm very open because I think that one of the best ways to beat a stigma is to, like you said, be open about it, give education, empower people with that knowledge, and give them the opportunity to make the choice themselves. And so something that I really appreciated was having you come in and almost help bridge that gap underneath some of my posts, like within the comments. And so I do think that the goal that you have, like I see you as somebody in the industry who is helping to illuminate like the things that we were told before, the grind hard, the suffer, those aren't necessarily going to get you to where you want to go. And maybe they do, but it's not going to be sustainable. You're not going to be able to compete long term. There's just so many detriments to that mindset. And so there's so many different ways that we could take this. But I did just
Uh,
want to I just wanted to say I really appreciate your goals and I support them and I see you as a leader in that sense in our industry. So I think it's really cool to have you on the podcast today. And one of the things that I do want to bring to the listeners, because the majority of my audience is female and the majority of them are competitors or they're interested in competing in some way. And so I think if we can almost speak directly to them and say, hey, here are the facts. When we speak about PEDs or we speak about TRT, HRT, different methods of supporting your health, we're not necessarily saying like, go do all the steroids, like throw the kitchen sink at yourself. That is not what happens here. And I think that a lot of the time when you admit to being on PEDs, like I have, you just start getting the most ridiculous comments like, well, you're a man, you sound like a man, you look like a man, your voice is terrible, all of these things. And I'm like, hey, I'm a pro. I'm a bodybuilding pro. I took calculated risks. I knew what was at stake. I knew what could be accomplished. And I chose to do things that maybe other people wouldn't. But at the end of the day, it is a choice. So if you can be empowered in your decision making, I think that's what's most important.
no, I 100% agree. 100% agree. And I think that, there's a lot of, still to this day, a lot of misunderstanding around hormones and PEDs and the overall purpose of PEDs. People kind of think that PEDs are why a bodybuilder looks a certain way. And okay, some arguments could be said to that extent, but we both know that genetics is 98% of the equation. Then you have hard work, then you have the guidance of said individual. That has to be appropriate. And then PED usage is that like 10% icing on the cake for everything else.
Yep. I think that that's understated for sure, especially with the genetics component. I don't know if many people realize that competing quite literally couldn't be for everybody. There are
Mm.
some individuals who genetically their resilience, the way that their body responds, the sensitivity to the extreme stress of it, it isn't possible for you. And that's such a hard thing to tell an athlete, but at the same time, bodybuilding isn't something to play with. So I think it should be something that is stated and it should be something considered. Like you might have to consider that you don't have the genetics for the sport, and that's okay.
Totally. And you know what's interesting? I don't know if you've ever analyzed this, but bodybuilding is the only sport on the planet that what you just said is true. I really wanted to play basketball as a kid, but you know what? I learned at a young age that at 5'9", I'm not going to be an NBA player. Why did I accept that, but I can't accept this?
Right.
Why does every single person watches football on Sunday? And at one point, they had dreams of being that next quarterback or running back. But they accepted that that wasn't in the cards. For some reason in bodybuilding, that's not the case. And I don't know if it's directly tied to PEDs and the assumption that that makes all the difference.
Mhm.
Um, but I remember years back when this kind of shows how old I am with regards to competing, when classic physique was first emerging,
Mhm.
you know, and in at least the male realm, as classic physique started emerging, there was a ton of comparison to current bodybuilders and athletes in comparison to the golden era of like Tom Platz and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and everyone was trying to make these arguments that the difference was drug usage and this and that. No, the difference was that in the 70s, there was about five guys competing in professional bodybuilding. You know who those five guys were? The genetic freaks. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Tom Platz, etc., Sergio Olivia, stuff like that. Now it's everyone. Now everyone's trying to do it. That's the difference. The difference is that it was this, the top 1% was doing it successfully. And like you said, we're learning more and more about genetic capacity and all the things that go into genetic potential. In bodybuilding, there's a lot. There's the muscle bellies, there's the insertions, there's the bone structure, fast twitch versus slow twitch muscle fibers. There's insulin sensitivity, all those little different responses play a huge role. But like you said, stress response and stress threshold is a
Mhm.
huge genetic component in bodybuilding. I have seen people's blood work where I'm just like, there is no way this person is going to live the next 2 years. 6 months later, they're winning the Olympia.
Yeah.
Stress thresholds. Two people cannot handle the same amount of toxic load, mental, physical stress, stuff like that. That's a genetic component that makes some of us superior than others.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's really difficult to parse that out. Like, sometimes you do have to go through a prep and get the blood work done and see what happens. Sometimes you do have to try it to come out the other side and realize, "Oh, man, maybe this isn't for me." Or flip
Sure.
side, "Oh, you know what? My body can handle this. I can handle this. I think that I wanna keep doing it." But what I guess I wanna take it back to the hormones and kind of go down that path a little bit. What are the most, like, common misconceptions that you see, especially with women, surrounding hormones?
Um, are we referencing performance or in general? Like PED hormones or just general hormone health?
Let's start with general, like general hormone health, and then we can go to
Sure.
PEDs.
Sure. So, I think one of the biggest issues, and this is not just in fitness, this is true in the entire Western medicine system, overall women's health. Um, Believe it or not, even in modern day, there's still not a huge appreciation or understanding of the vast differences between women's physiology and male physiology. And so the focal point is very much catered around testosterone and estrogen,
Mhm.
and progesterone is just non-existent. I've said this for over 5 years in both the fitness world and Western medicine in general. Progesterone is the most disregarded hormone in a woman's body. And interestingly enough, it's the most important hormone in a
Mhm.
woman's body. If you were to ask, 10 physicians about the importance of progesterone, at least eight would respond, you only need that for pregnancy. And that's how it's treated, as a pregnancy hormone.
Interesting.
But progesterone plays a lot of important roles in the body. Number one, it's essential for mental health. It's the calming hormone. So women who are deficient in progesterone have a lot more anxiety, depression, mental health struggles. It's essential for thyroid function. This is why women are so much more susceptible to thyroid issues compared to men. Um, and most importantly, it's essential for metabolic health. So women with deficient progesterone have the most weight loss resistance. They store extra water and fat around their waist, butt, and lower body. They tend to have more cellulite. We're basically talking about 85% of female society right now, you
Mhm.
know? Um, and so that's a huge issue is how disregarded progesterone is. I would say 6 out of 10 physicians don't even test it. And out of the physicians who do test it for women, they don't even know what the appropriate number should be. They're just going off of standard reference ranges.
Mhm.
And the reference ranges are already set women up for failure. Mainly because when you look at blood work and you look at the reference ranges, it shows you the reference ranges for each phase of her cycle.
Mhm.
But guess what? The blood work doesn't know what phase she's in. So the blood work is going to say 0 to 300 is normal or 0 to 600 is normal. There's no individual customized view of where that is. And obviously in functional medicine, we tell women to get it done at a specific time of their cycle,
Yep.
their luteal phase, so we can at least have a bit more accuracy. But even that discussion or recommendation is not being done 80% of the time.
Wow. I didn't realize that. I so when I got into coaching and started to learn how to read blood work, that was one of the first things I was told was with my female athletes, like make sure that they're getting it done on day 19 or like within whatever their cycle length is, their
Yeah,
luteal phase.
correct.
I didn't realize that that wasn't like common practice though. That's
No, not at all, because they don't the progesterone is not a consideration, you know?
right.
And the whole point of doing the luteal phase is that's when we see that spike or rise in progesterone. So any other time of the month, it is normal for progesterone to be low.
Mhm.
So when we look at the luteal phase, if it's low when it's supposed to be high, well, then we know we have a real problem.
Yep.
I think the other issue is too going off of the reference ranges in general. Um, there's not a set amount of progesterone that a woman's supposed to have. It's not as simple as, you know, testosterone should be this range. In a woman's body, what's much more important is the balanced ratio of estrogen to progesterone, not necessarily an individual number. So it's not even necessarily a matter of, okay, look at the progesterone and is it within range? It's more so looking at her estradiol, her estrogen, then comparing the progesterone and making sure that that's a healthy balance.
Yep. Looking at
And
the
if you don't
ratio.
know any of that, then you're not going to guide anyone properly, anyways,
Yeah.
you know?
So, where do you think it came from that progesterone was disregarded and within the framework of bodybuilding, when progesterone is low, let's say you're in a contest prep phase
Hmm.
and it's, you know, you're driving estrogen dominance, what do you recommend if competitors I for me, I like my girls getting blood work done like during prep as well so that we can see like, okay, here was your baseline before we started, here's where you're at now, here's what we can do to finish out this prep strong. Like I prefer getting that data and knowing before I supplement. I don't just want to supplement blindly. But in those scenarios, like what do you recommend?
Yeah. So, I don't want to put too much blame on the fitness industry or coaches. If Western medicine isn't putting out the knowledge, how can we expect bodybuilding coaches to know?
Right.
It's kind of sad that nowadays fitness coaches are actually more educated than our Western medicine professionals. It's no one's fault. We get our knowledge from Western medicine until we've learned better otherwise. But the biggest issue with progesterone, why it's so likely to be low, is because when we look at hormone metabolization pathways in the body, progesterone is actually a precursor to cortisol, the stress hormone. So when a woman's body is under higher stress load and the body is demanding more cortisol be made, it actually steals it away from progesterone. So a higher stress woman is guaranteed to have low progesterone. This is a facts over feelings conversation. This is science. It's going to happen, it's inevitable. So when we think about all the various stressors put on a female athlete, it's inevitable. I think another issue is that, and this is not just in fitness, but in the general community or in the general world, a lot of people don't understand that the human body wasn't made for 2024. It was made for caveman times, thousands of years ago. So the way we perceive stress in modern day life is very different than how our body perceives stress. Our subconscious can differentiate little stressors, but our body does not. There's no such thing as good and bad stress, and there's no such things as levels of stress. It's all viewed the exact same way. Financial stress, emotional stress, trauma, physical stress of overtraining and under recovering, toxic load from PEDs, too much stimulants, dysregulated circadian rhythms because they're a night shift nurse. All of these things are stressors. And now we're just talking about normal life. We haven't even added in the athlete stress.
Yeah.
Overtraining, under eating, all of these things playing into it at once. It's never singular stressors that cause dysfunction. It's the accumulation of too much stress. So that's important too, because when people hear this, they're probably going to say, well, I'm not stressed. But they have to recognize that there's probably 20 stressors that they aren't perceiving in their life right now. And that's why their progesterone is so deficient. So to your question about, how do we kind of, mitigate and stay on top of this? Well, obviously in the off season, we should be looking to optimize this, keeping food high, training and recovery at a proper balance, and watching out for PEDs, because through my experience, what I've seen, just about any anabolic PED is going to reduce progesterone. So, and a lot of people don't know that fact. So they think, oh, I'm doing my off season, my food is high, my hormones are going to heal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not necessarily if you're blasting a couple compounds. So then your hormones were shut down in off season, and now you're starting prep with shut down hormones.
Yeah.
So, it is tough to say, because a lot of the things we do in the sport are most likely going to dysregulate progesterone. And it's not necessary to say, hey, we never want to allow that to happen. It's more so that we all need to be conscious of it, understand cause and effect of what we do, and allow it to happen to a certain extent with the knowledge of, okay, after this prep is done, we need to fix this.
Yes.
Planning ahead, but also from the front end, I think a really good coach has very in-depth questionnaires and intake forms and has these types of conversations on the front end. They get comprehensive blood work, like you said. That should be one of the very first things we do onboarding a client, to prepare for what's ahead. Another big thing is birth control usage.
Yeah, it's huge.
A lot of women don't actually understand the mechanism of action of hormonal birth control. And to be fair, a lot of doctors don't understand the mechanism of action of birth control. So how can we expect women to understand if the physician doesn't understand? And so I think it's important too that, we take that into consideration. Your progesterone could have been crashed before you even started bodybuilding. And then it just got worse and worse and worse over the years, putting your body through the ringer.
Yep. And hormonal birth
So,
control is such a stressor on its own too. Like
big
that
big time.
causes massive systemic stress. And I can you can tell looking at blood work if somebody's been on birth control for a few years. Like the stress just accumulates, and there are certain tells in the blood work now where I can look at it and I'm like, you've been on birth control for quite a while now, haven't you? And they're always like, how'd you know? I was like, well, we got some work to do. And it's
Yeah.
just been tough. It's been tough having those conversations that like, hey, because I was there too. As a teenager, I thought it was a magic pill. I was like, oh, I just have to take that and it fixes my acne, makes my
Mhm.
periods lighter. Like that was the image that I had of it, the information that I had. So of course I was like, yeah, I'd love to be on it. And then it the doctors didn't really explain to me, like you're saying, the mechanism of action. They didn't say this is what's happening. Your hormones aren't being fixed. Nothing's being fixed. You might have acne from a gut issue or hormone imbalance or something that needs looked at. Instead, they're like, "Oh yeah, birth control will help with your acne. Yeah, for sure. Here you go."
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating to I don't, like you said, like I don't want to blame the doctors necessarily. I don't think that they're not bad people. They don't have bad intentions. I truly don't think that the information and the education behind the consequences of it are out there, are being talked
No, I
about.
fully agree. I these days, I try to be careful not to demonize contraceptives too much. I I think the best way to describe them are a necessary evil for some people.
Right.
But I think the problem is, as you said, the lack of transparency and preparation when they start something. Imagine starting a 14-year-old boy on this microdosed androgen, not enough to support his performance, but just enough to shut down his testosterone and sperm production. That's what they're doing to women. Um, they've tried many different forms of male birth control, and every single one has failed for the same reason because it shuts down male testosterone, and men can't live with unhealthy testosterone levels.
Right.
But the same consensus, it hasn't been the same for women.
Yes. I do I want to reiterate what you said. I don't want to demonize contraceptives. I wish that the information about them was more free and out there. I do
Yeah, so
see
everyone
like
can make their own decision.
exactly. Something that changed, I guess, my perception of it years ago was when I realized when they made birth control and they tested it with women, they specifically made birth control for healthy women, AKA
Mhm,
women with no hormonal imbalances who are in a very healthy spot, like overall. They
mhm,
designed the contraceptives for those women. So if you're going in and you don't know that you have a hormonal imbalance, you don't know that maybe there's like gut dysbiosis or pre-existing issues and you're just putting the contraceptive on top of that, like that's where I think maybe there could be better action taken. Almost to what you're speaking on, like let's support the woman, get her to a healthy spot and then we can start the contraceptives and the consequences might not be as dire down the road.
totally. Yeah, but I mean, going back to, the prep coach scenario,
Mhm.
having that knowledge on the front end of, well, is there imbalance upon us starting? That's number one. Having the ability to try to improve that imbalance before diving into too much, that's number two. And then number three, knowing cause and effect of each of the actions we're going to take and what might need to happen down the road to improve things. I think those three factors are important. Understanding that there are supplements to support these things to kind of band-aid the damage as you go through, but it's a matter of, knowledge at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And open-mindedness from the client. I think a lot of clients still don't fully understand the benefit of getting comprehensive blood work all the time because it's expensive, you know, but that's a roadmap to how your body is going to perform.
Yes, and it'll give you the results that you're looking for faster because you'll have a
Yes.
clear picture of what's happening. You won't have to do so much trial and error. You won't have to throw stuff at the wall, see what sticks. You'll get a very clear picture. You'll get a map. So I totally agree. But funnily enough, it wasn't until I got into bodybuilding that I started doing regular blood work. Like before then,
Yeah.
I don't think I actually ever got blood work done. So
Sure.
it is something that's not common that maybe could be better. I think if you have a PCP or a doctor, I think generally people do get yearly blood work. I'll probably expose myself here. I don't have a PCP. I move too often. I haven't put roots down in a city where I can have a doctor, but
Sure. Well, the issue comes there. That is true to a degree, but and I don't know if you've experienced this yourself or with your clients, but the issue is there that blood work that they do is not that comprehensive. And
yeah,
I'd say 50% of the time, they don't even check hormones. I've
right,
had women sign up with me and say, "Oh, my hormones are perfect." Okay, can I see your labs? TSH. They didn't even check sex hormones,
right.
you know? So, I and a lot of that, like you said, is not necessarily doctors. Sometimes it is. I've learned that doctors won't order tests that they can't interpret.
Mm.
So they will look for reasons to not order tests that they can't themselves interpret. The other issue is insurance. Our entire medical system is controlled by big pharma and insurance. It's a business model, it's not a healthcare model. Insurance companies handcuff doctors. Doctors get in trouble for ordering comprehensive labs because that costs the insurance company money. So the insurance company will actually come back to that doctor and say, "Why the hell did you do that? Why did you order those labs? She's a 25-year-old girl. She doesn't need to be checking all of her hormones. She doesn't need to check cortisol. She doesn't need to check those things." So the doctors are really in the situation where they can only do so much.
Mhm.
And I think that's why it's also become so popular for us to just buy it cash, from a website or something like that and not even deal with our PCPs.
That makes sense. Yeah. Actually, when you say that, that's so true. When people go through their PCPs, there's just chunks missing where I'm like, well, we didn't even really test what we wanted to test. There's
Right.
values on here that aren't helpful without the bigger pieces of the puzzle. So, yeah, that makes sense. Is that one of the reasons why you wanted who started Rise HRT? Was it you and somebody and a partner?
It's me and my girlfriend.
You and your girlfriend? Okay.
Yeah, we started together. Yeah.
Nice. So what is y'all's background? Where did where did you start?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I've been coaching for the past 13 years. We met 5 years ago. She was actually uh sad to admit this. She was a client of mine. She was a women's physique competitor. And so we developed a relationship that way. And her big season was actually right as 2020 hit. She was 3 weeks out of nationals
Oh, man.
and very likely going to go pro in women's physique. But things just kind of changed. And her background, she's been an accountant and ran a couple different companies with her dad. And so she has a lot of the administrative, bookkeeping, accountant skills, and I obviously had the medical professional information side of it. So together, it just made it uh, a great partnership to get a
Yeah.
company up and running. Um, I had previously worked with a few different companies. As I got educated over the years. I started connecting with different people. I spent about a year and a half, 2 years working with a board certified functional physician in Charlotte, North Carolina. I kind of handled anything that was not requiring prescriptions, and
Mhm.
I handled the holistic side of things. He handled anything that took required, prescriber authority. And we had a pretty good relationship. However, he was still a bit old school and did not like the bodybuilding community and the demands of the bodybuilding community, especially when it came to younger women. And he was uncomfortable supporting women's hormones who were under the age of 30. And his response was, they just need to take 2 years off. And
Okay.
it's just like, buddy, that's not going to work. They're
Mhm.
6 months away from becoming a pro athlete. You know, So again, it got to that same point of I'd rather help them than send them to some guy who makes gear out of his bathtub, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so when that relationship kind of started going a separate way, at the same time, I was actually starting to get contacted by various online clinics to help educate their PAs and MPs in a better understanding of comprehensive blood work and
Mhm.
looking at it through a functional medicine scope and not just going off of standard reference ranges. So I started consulting with a lot of different clinics across the US, which ended up leading to a invitation to come on board with the clinic as their clinical director.
Wow.
I did that for about 6 months, and that was going really, really well. However, that clinic got very hyper focused on profits
Mm.
over making the best decisions for the patients. So, that lasted probably about 6 months, and I was like, "You know what? I think I can just do this better on my own." And so the
Yeah.
the little bit of added education I got from that 6 months, kind of and the networking that I made with compounding pharmacies and stuff, that just kind of set the stage for the next step. So we officially opened our doors in October of 2022. So we've been open for about a year and a half now.
Wow. That's incredible. I think that that is so cool. It sounds like you're very much somebody who saw the gap in the industry that was needed and you were like, I can fill it. I can do that." And you're
Yeah, yeah.
somebody, yeah. I love that. You have the experience, you have the knowledge, and so you took action here. Do you specifically work with athletes and bodybuilders now? Is that your primary focus?
Not necessarily primarily.
Mhm.
We at the clinic we work with a lot of different teams. Um, a lot of the big name teams trust us when it comes to functional medicine situations, GI dysfunction. Um, we work with a ton of different Olympians and stuff like that. So a lot of different coaching teams trust us. Sometimes it's a matter of us just giving a second opinion, looking over blood work. If it's, an extreme situation, I may take the reins for 3 to 4 months, fix all the dysfunction, send them back to the coach so that they can focus on contest prep and,
Mhm.
what they're good at.
Do you
So
do
we have,
do you
go
do
ahead.
blood work consultation? Is that
We
something
do.
that
Yeah.
you offer? Nice. Okay,
Yep.
very cool.
We do. Yeah.
People listening, take note.
I still coach plenty of athletes on my own.
Mhm.
It's definitely different than like 2 years ago where my number one priority was being a prep coach and I was traveling to every national show and stuff like that. It's definitely changed since then, but I still do, prep clients here and there. But it's my main focus these days is just health optimization, whether that's my own clients or somebody else's client who's coming to the clinic for some assistance.
Mhm. What's the most common, I don't wanna say, like, issue, but I guess, yeah, what's the most common issue that you see with females that are coming to you?
Uncontrolled stress,
Yeah.
poor recovery and stress mitigation. Their training and overall programming is very similar to a male's. And to a degree, there can be arguments back and forth, but when we really look at the science and physiology, women's hormone health is so reliant on adrenal health, and men are not. I would say women are 10 times more reliant on adrenal health compared to men. And the adrenals, for those who don't know, are what produces cortisol, our stress hormone. That plays a huge role in your sleep and wake cycle. It plays a huge role in your energy, your motivation, blood sugar, your cholesterol, your sex hormone function, your thyroid function, everything. So, a great example is just sleep in itself. Men can handle, 6 to 7 hours and function very well. It's proven that women need 8 to 9 hours to function just as well as a guy with 6 to 7 hours. So those 2 extra hours of sleep are a game changer for women's function.
Hmm.
And we both know most women are not getting 8 to 9 hours every night. So that's an issue in itself. But then when we also look at the level of training, I think a big problem here is, and this is not necessarily coaches programming, but I think the overall thought process around training. So many people are emotionally attached to training
Yeah.
that they don't rationally think about recovery, you know?
Yeah.
Uh, and men are not quite the same. Men are attached to training, but men are so focused on muscle growth that they appreciate rest days and recovery a bit more than I think women do, if that makes sense.
Yes, I've seen that a ton with my male athletes. They love their rest days. They love when I tell them, "Hey, you need to take 3 days off. Like we need to just take a break." With
Mhm.
my female athletes, they'll say, "Oh, I didn't really feel that tired, so I added some extra sets."
Yep.
It's like, "Why?" But I totally agree. There's an emotional tie. And I've been there. I really have. Like
Yeah.
when you have the goal, when you're trying to get to stage, you think more is better. You think, okay, if I just really, really push myself, I'm going to get there. I'm going to look great. I'm going to win all of these things. And I think that that's sometimes the subliminal messaging that comes through in the industry as well is like, just do more, do more, do more. But to your point, it sounds like, especially for women, for my female athletes, like taking the rest days, making sure that you recover, taking extra rest days. If I tell them all the time, if you wake up and you do not feel refreshed, you feel fatigued from the moment that you get up, take the rest day. There's no reason why we should go force ourselves to train, even if training is your like mental escape, if it's your you time, we need to find things outside of the gym that you love that
Abs
you can do. I push that really hard. The last year or so, I think my focus has switched to really cultivating hobbies for myself
yes.
as well as like encouraging that with my athletes. Like, what do you like to do outside of the gym? And
Yes.
don't tell me that it's something else fitness related. Like, oh, going for runs. Like, okay, great. What do you like to do where you can just sit?
Right. No, I 100% agree with you, and I don't know about you, but for me, COVID was kind of a time that forced that because we didn't have gym access. So it's like, it's kinda like that Will Ferrell thing, "I don't know what to do with my hands." Like, they, like,
Yeah.
literally, had nothing to do. Well, it's like, "Well, let's go do other sports, other hobbies. Let's hang out with friends. Let's go to the beach," you know? There's so many other things to do, um, and I do think that exercise for a lot of people is a coping mechanism. And then when you're overdoing it, it can become a toxic coping mechanism. And so we have to be careful with that. And so I 100% agree with you on that. But yeah, so I think a better appreciation of sleep and a better appreciation of recovery are two major things. I also think a better understanding of PED application and that there's more than just androgen options. There's actually better options than androgen options in a lot of situations. I think that could make a huge difference as well in overall women's health and longevity.
I completely agree. I love that you brought this up. I do want to touch on it. We have about 15 minutes left, but I do want to touch. So I'll just ask you the question. Do you think that natural bodybuilding is healthy?
Um, No, I don't think bodybuilding is healthy in general. Competitive bodybuilding. Let's be clear there. If you're just wanting to improve your physique for your significant other and you go to the gym 4 times a week, hey, that's great. Competitive bodybuilding, where you're trying to get peeled with striated glutes and stuff like that, that is not healthy. Let's, whether we're talking men or women, but specifically women, let's really think about this. Natural women are not supposed to have delt caps that look like baseballs. They're not supposed to have veins coming through their abs. They're not supposed to have striated glutes. None of these things are natural for women. So why do we assume natural women are going to accomplish it? It just doesn't make sense. And when you also understand the demands of bodybuilding, as well as the physiology and science of a woman's body, it's setting themselves up for a lot of issues down the road, whether we're talking fertility, mental health, metabolic health, all of the above. You know, um, no, I think natural competitive bodybuilding more often than not leads to more dysfunction in comparison to intelligent, low risk PED practices.
Yes.
If we're comparing a natural competitor to somebody blasting, several androgens, that's not a good comparison either. Those are two extremes, I guess.
Yes.
We need to come right in the middle. And I think one of the most important things with any PED application is, um, you know, analyzing things in advance and using that needs analysis. I think a needs analysis is always important. And what do we mean by needs analysis? Well, number one, blood work. Blood work decides needs analysis. Number two, asking the question, what are our goals? Are our goals muscle growth? Are our goals fat loss? And don't say both at the same time. So, understanding what drugs are going to be best towards muscle growth with the lowest risk, what drugs are going to be best for fat loss with the lowest risk. These are the questions that we should be asking before we apply PEDs, not just, well, I heard bikini girls do best with Anavar.
Right.
That is not a educated, decision.
No, just because it is the like norm or you hear about it a lot doesn't mean that it's right. And I think
Sure.
that's something that I've had that conversation a lot with my bikini athletes as well when they're asking. Like they're like, "Well, I don't want to inject anything. I just want to do Anavar." And I'm like, "Well, why Anavar? Like why do you think that you want to do that one?" And usually the answer is because, "Oh, well, my friend did it or I heard so and so did it and they looked great. They were fine." And I just have to remember that they're very new, they don't understand, but taking them through, "Hey, here's what Anavar does. Here's its mechanism of action, and here's why it's not going to be the best for you." Like, you look at your blood work, look at your life right now. What are our goals? Like you're saying, ask those questions, but almost walking them through it and
Yeah.
telling them, "This is
Yeah.
why." At the end of the day, it is their choice. If they take that knowledge, they take what I'm saying, they do their own research, and still they want to go a certain route, as a coach, my hands are kind of tied in that regard. But I haven't had anyone who has gone through that conversation with me come out the other side and decide to go the opposite direction. Most of the
Yeah.
time, they're like, "Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for telling me. Y- You have provided me with information that I feel comfortable going this route, like going with what you're saying would be better." But
Yeah.
I do wish that that conversation was had a lot more between coach and athlete, even when I started. And I think this is like a deeper rooted issue. This is probably a completely like separate podcast topic. But when I first started, I had a coach. I don't think he had ill intentions, but he was a bodybuilder himself. And this is back in 2017, like local coach. He had done bodybuilding shows. He started doing coaching, offering coaching, and he coached me like a mini man. So, but me being new, I thought, "Oh, this is what it is." Like he's an authority figure to me. So I didn't ask any questions. I almost prided myself where I was like, "Oh, I just do what he says. I don't ask any questions." And looking back, I just going through that experience myself, I don't want any of my athletes to ever feel that way, or athletes that listen to this podcast to feel like you have to people please with your coach or you have to just go along with what they say. Like, please ask the questions, because how your coach answers, if they answer, how they walk you through it will tell you a lot about how they're going to care for your health.
Totally.
Because bodybuilding at the end of the day is not healthy. That's what we just talked about. It's not a healthy endeavor. Competitive bodybuilding. I like that.
Right.
I like that caveat. But
Well, and I also think that we need to differentiate. There's a difference between not trusting your coach and asking questions.
Yes.
You can politely ask a question and say, "Hey, I'm just looking for to become better educated on why we're doing this process," which I always try to explain to my people anyways. I learned a long time ago, if they understand the why, they're going to follow it.
Yes.
If you just say, "Hey, go do this because I said so," probably not going to follow it 100%. So I tell every client that I get, I'm an open book. Don't be scared to ask me questions. But that's different than questioning a decision or talking to someone else. And my friend said I should be doing more cardio and this and that. Those are two different things. So I think everyone kind of also needs to work on their communication with their coach. And if they don't have a trusting, comfortable relationship, that might not be a conducive coach client scenario, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's so important. And the communication. Communication is across the board one of the biggest things that I stress to my athletes, and still I think it's one of the biggest issues just in general. People's communication these days is very interesting. There's a lot lacking there. We're all trying our best,
Mm.
but I think there's room for improvement with communication in a lot of
Very much
aspects.
agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, before we wrap up, I just want to make sure, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you want to talk about or anything that you want to say to leave the listeners with?
Um, the main thing I'll say is, I want to be careful not to, scare or deter anyone from attempting competitive bodybuilding. More so, I think the point that we're both trying to make is that there's intelligent approaches and not so intelligent approaches. And it's difficult to siphon through that. But podcasts and following the right people, getting the word out there, that's very important. I think while it's improved a lot, one of the most important things in the future years is women like yourself being transparent. I think transparency is still lacking a lot because of social media and egos and stuff like that. But what professional female athletes need to understand is it's not about you, it's about helping as many people as possible. If you want to be a influencer with 1 million followers, let's use that influence for good and not just for your own, mental health. So I think that that's super important. I think the reason I wanted I was excited to be on this podcast is because I think you do a great job. I think you are one of those pioneers putting out real information, whether people like it or not. You're putting out the facts that women need to hear. And the more prepared a woman is getting into competitive bodybuilding, the better off her journey or experience is going to be.
Yes. I so appreciate that. Thank you. I think
Yeah.
it's really important to shed light on areas of the sport that need to be talked about, and I'm not afraid to talk about it because I went through experiences that have shaped me to who I am today, and I love bodybuilding. I will bodybuild until I can't, and at that point I'll
Yeah.
become a judge. Like I want to be in I want to be part of the sport forever, and I'm so passionate about it that is why I created this podcast and why I do what I do, because I think it's important that people are just informed. I want them to find the same joy and passion and competitive drive and learn how to challenge themselves, learn discipline, all the things that bodybuilding has given to me. I want that for other people, and I
Yeah.
want them to be informed. I want them to understand what they're getting themselves into, and then just to see them flourish within it so that we don't have health consequences down the road, so that they're not surprised when things happen. That really is my goal. So I do appreciate you saying that. And
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate what you do. And one thing that I'll kind of try to leave people with is we've talked a lot about health throughout this process and longevity, but I don't want to only uh, implicate health to longevity and the concepts of once you're done competing. A healthy body is a responsive body. If you're not seeing consistent progress in your contest prep, you're not healthy. That's the problem. It's probably not just a matter of a new coach's program, or it's definitely not a new drug. I can assure you of that. If your body is not responding, something is going on and you need to dive into that. And so, the emphasis around health is to help you become your most successful competitor. Healthy bodies respond better. So we should all be looking at this of how do we push a body while keeping it healthy?
Yes.
That should be the goal of every single competitor, male or female.
Yes. I love that. I could not agree more. And I'm so happy that that is a focus that coaches like us have. It's not necessarily, it's not, yeah, we can get you to stage and like how quick and how fast and how many things can we use and do. It's truly how can we keep your health and also get you ready for this competitive bodybuilding and then take care of your health afterwards. There's a lot of thought that I think we both put into our clients' health. And it's not just because, like you're saying, it's not just because of longevity. It's not just because, oh, when you're done with the sport. It's so that you can excel in the sport. So I think that's important to
Yes, you
state.
you can be your leanest, tightest on stage. Your skin is healthy. You still have some hair left on your head. All those things are important, especially to certain judges. We know
Mhm.
that. Sandy's a great example. Sandy never competed in her life. Sandy's perspective of what she judges is not a competitor's perspective. She likes the other things, the hair, the makeup, the suits, the posing, you know? She doesn't necessarily dial into this glute tie-in and
Right.
this muscle belly and stuff. She's paying attention to the other things.
Yeah.
And you can tell the difference, backstage of healthy and unhealthy people.
Unfortunately, yes, you absolutely can. And sometimes on stage you can really see it. If they have gut issues, if their maybe skin is a little bit duller, maybe the tan didn't take. Like there's certain external things that do appear on stage where you can say, "Oh man, that competitor does not look their healthiest." And to your point, Sandy is such an advocate for having a healthy look on stage. And so I do think that that is another reason why, hey, you guys need to be really careful about where you're pushing your body and who you're allowing to guide you there and just continue to learn and empower yourself. Like we put these podcasts out there. We have our content, on Instagram, and I'm mainly on Instagram. I'm not sure if you're on like TikTok or anything, but
Not
TikTok's full of
much.
misinformation. I will say that. Um, but we do our best to put the education out there. And so I really encourage all of the competitors out there to, do your due diligence and understand what you're getting into. But it is an incredible sport. So hopefully people can take that away. This is purely from passion. We're here to help guide competitors to the stage in a healthy manner, in the best way that we can. So I love that. Well,
Absolutely.
I've really appreciated getting to speak with you today. This is our first time actually like face to face talking, but I feel
Yeah,
like
I know.
it's so
I loved it.
easy. Yeah. Well, you are a great resource and I highly encourage everybody listening, go check you out. Where can they find you?
So I'm on Instagram more than anything, like you said. So my IG handle is Matt the Body Tech. Um, if you guys need any blood work or assistance analyzing blood work, feel free to check out my clinic, Rise HRT. Um, but yeah, I'm always happy to have a great conversation about this. So anytime in the future, I'd be happy to do it again.
I would love that. I think there's so much more we could dive into. So we'll definitely plan that again. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate you. Everybody listening, thank you for tuning in. And we will catch you on the next episode. Stay relentless.